"Can I stay for one night?" the Apache girl asked. The rancher murmured. "Then, where do I sleep?" The ranch was quiet as the sun slowly went down behind the wide open land. The sky changed color, turning from light blue to soft orange, then slowly into deep purple. The wind moved gently across the dry grass, carrying the smell of soil and animals. The rancher finished his work for the day, closing the gate of the barn and checking the animals one last time. His body felt tired, but it was the kind of tired he was used to. Every day was almost the same, and he had learned not to expect anything different. He lived alone on the ranch. No family, no close neighbors, and very little contact with the outside world. He had chosen this life years ago after too many disappointments and losses. The land did not talk back, did not judge, and did not leave. It simply existed, and that was enough for him. When night came, he usually ate a simple meal, cleaned up, and sat quietly with his thoughts until sleep arrived. That evening felt no different at first. He went inside his small wooden house, washed his hands, and prepared some food. The room was dim, lit only by a lamp on the table. The house was clean but plain, with very few personal items. Everything had a purpose, nothing extra. He ate slowly, listening to the quiet sounds of the night outside. Just as he was about to stand up and put the plate away, he heard something unexpected. A knock. At first, he thought he imagined it. No one ever came out this way, especially not after dark. He stood still, holding his breath. Then the knock came again, soft but clear. His heart started to beat faster. He wasn't afraid, but he was cautious. He grabbed a jacket and walked toward the door, his steps slow and careful. He opened it just a little. Standing outside was a young girl. She looked tired, as if she had been walking for a long time. Dust covered her shoes and the bottom of her clothes. Her dark hair was tied back loosely, with strands falling around her face. Her eyes were wide, not rude or demanding, but careful and unsure. She stood straight, trying to appear calm, but it was clear she was nervous. "Sir," she said quietly, her voice respectful and soft. "Can I stay for one night?" The rancher was surprised. He hadn't seen her coming, hadn't heard any footsteps or animals. She seemed to appear out of nowhere. He studied her face, trying to understand who she was and why she was here. She did not look dangerous. She looked young, alone, and very tired. He hesitated. His mind filled with questions. Where did she come from? Why was she alone? Was it safe to let her in? But when he looked at her again, he saw something that stopped his thoughts, honesty mixed with fear. She wasn't asking for comfort or special treatment, just one night. The air between them felt heavy as he took a moment before answering. Finally, he stepped back and opened the door wider. "All right," he said slowly, "one night." Relief crossed her face, but she did not smile. She nodded respectfully and stepped inside. The warmth of the house wrapped around her as the door closed behind them. For a moment, neither of them spoke. He offered her a seat at the table and brought her some water. She thanked him quietly, holding the cup with both hands as if it were something valuable. She drank slowly, careful not to spill. He noticed how polite she was, how she waited for permission before doing anything. It told him she was used to being careful. She shared very little about herself. She said she was Apache and that she had been traveling. She did not explain why or where she was going. The rancher did not push her to speak. He knew that sometimes silence was safer than questions. As the night grew darker, the quiet returned, but it felt different now. The house was no longer empty. He could hear her breathing, soft and steady, as she sat across from him. He felt awkward, unsure what to do next. He wasn't used to company, especially not someone so young and unfamiliar. He stood up and looked around the house. That's when the reality of the situation reached him. There was only one bed. He scratched the back of his head and let out a small breath. He hadn't thought that far ahead. He turned to her, feeling slightly embarrassed. "Then where do I sleep?" he murmured, more to himself than to her. She looked up quickly, surprised. Her face showed concern and she shook her head right away. She didn't want to cause trouble. "I can sleep on the floor," she said quickly. "It's okay." He shook his head. "No. You're the guest." After a short moment of quiet thinking, he brought a blanket and placed it on a chair near the fireplace. It wasn't comfortable, but it would do. He pointed to the bed. "You take the bed," he said. She hesitated again, clearly uncomfortable accepting it. But finally she nodded. "Thank you," she said softly. She lay down carefully, staying fully dressed, as if ready to leave at any moment. The rancher sat by the fire, pulling the blanket around his shoulders. The chair creaked slightly as he shifted his weight. The fire crackled quietly, filling the space between them. Sleep did not come easily for either of them. The rancher stared into the fire, his thoughts restless. He wondered how someone like her ended up knocking on his door in the middle of nowhere. He also wondered why he had agreed so easily. Maybe it was the loneliness he had grown used to, or maybe it was something in her eyes that reminded him of a time when he, too, needed help and found none. The girl lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She listened to the sounds of the house, every small noise making her alert. She didn't fully relax, but she felt safer than she had in a long time. The warmth, the quiet, and the simple kindness of a stranger gave her a small sense of peace. Outside, the night moved on. The wind slowed, the stars shone brightly, and the ranch stood still under the wide sky. Inside the small house, two strangers stayed awake, each lost in their own thoughts, both unaware that this single night was already changing something deep inside them. The knock that had broken the silence was more than a request for shelter. It was the beginning of a story neither of them had planned, one built not on words, but on trust given without promise. The night felt longer than usual. The fire slowly burned down, its light turning softer and dimmer. The rancher adjusted the blanket around his shoulders and tried to find a comfortable position on the chair, but sleep refused to come. Every small sound in the house felt louder than before, the ticking of the old clock, the gentle crack of wood in the fireplace, the quiet movement of the wind outside. He glanced toward the bed. The girl lay still, facing the wall, her back straight as if she was afraid to relax too much. She did not move, but he could tell she was awake. There was a certain stillness about her that came from years of staying alert, even when rest was allowed. After some time, the rancher cleared his throat softly. He didn't know why, but the silence felt heavy, like something unspoken was pressing against his chest. "You warm enough?" he asked quietly. There was a short pause before she answered. "Yes," she said. "Thank you." Her voice was calm but careful. He nodded to himself, though she couldn't see it. He leaned his head back and closed his eyes, hoping sleep would finally arrive. Instead, memories came instead, old ones he usually kept locked away. Nights like this reminded him too much of the past, of times when he wasn't alone, when life felt fuller and louder. Minutes passed, maybe longer. "I didn't mean to trouble you," the girl said suddenly, her voice breaking the silence again. He opened his eyes and looked toward her. "You didn't," he replied honestly. She turned slightly, now facing him. The firelight touched her face, showing tired eyes and a quiet seriousness far beyond her years. "I really will leave in the morning," she said. "I promise." He believed her. There was no doubt in his mind that she meant every word. "I know," he said. "You don't owe me anything." She nodded and looked down at her hands. For a while, neither of them spoke. But something about the night made words easier than usual, as if the darkness gave them permission to speak without fear. "I've been walking for days," she said softly. "Sometimes I sleep outside. Sometimes I don't sleep at all." The rancher felt a tightness in his chest. He didn't interrupt her. "I don't like asking for help," she continued. "But tonight I had no choice." "You chose right," he said quietly. She looked at him again, surprised by his tone. It wasn't pity, it wasn't curiosity, it was simple honesty. The fire shifted, sending a small spark upward. The rancher stood and added another piece of wood. The warmth grew again, pushing back the cold that had begun to creep into the room. She sat up slowly on the bed, pulling the blanket closer around herself. "I didn't think anyone would open the door," she admitted. "I almost didn't," he said. She smiled faintly at that, not offended. "I understand." They shared a small moment of quiet understanding, two people who knew what it meant to be cautious, to expect very little from others. "Where's your family?" he asked gently, careful not to sound demanding. Her expression changed, but she didn't look away. "They're gone," she said. "Some a long time ago, some more recently." "I'm sorry," he said. She nodded once. "I've learned how to keep going." He admired that strength, even if he knew it came from pain. "This land teaches you that," he said, gesturing around the house. "It doesn't care if you're ready or not, it just keeps moving." She looked around the small room, noticing the worn furniture, the clean floor, the lack of decoration. "You've been alone a long time," she said, not as a question but as an observation. He chuckled softly. "That obvious?" She shrugged slightly. "Loneliness leaves marks. You don't hide them, you live with them." Her words surprised him. He had spent years avoiding people, believing isolation made life simpler. But hearing it spoken aloud made him realize how visible it truly was. The clock ticked on. Outside, an animal called out in the distance, then faded back into the night. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "Regret what?" "Being alone." He thought about it. The answer wasn't simple. "Sometimes," he said finally, "but regret doesn't change much. You either accept your choices or they eat at you." She considered that carefully. "I don't want to live alone," she said. "I just haven't found where I belong." The honesty in her voice struck him deeply. He remembered a time when he said the same thing, when he believed belonging was something you could search for and find. Now he wasn't so sure. The fire crackled again. The rancher shifted on the chair, his back sore but his mind alert. "You can rest," he said. "You're safe here tonight." She lay back down, but this time her shoulders relaxed slightly. "Thank you," she said again, her voice softer now. As the night continued, the house seemed to breathe with them. The walls no longer felt empty. The quiet no longer felt heavy. It felt shared. At some point the girl finally fell asleep. Her breathing grew slow and even, the tension leaving her body little by little. The rancher watched her for a moment, then looked away, giving her privacy even in rest. Sleep came to him in short pieces. He drifted off, then woke again, his body uncomfortable but his heart strangely calm. Each time he woke, he checked the room, making sure everything was all right. Just before dawn, the sky outside began to lighten. The deep black of night turned into soft gray. Birds started to stir, their quiet sounds floating through the open land. The rancher stood and stretched carefully, his joints stiff. He added one last piece of wood to the fire to keep the room warm. The girl remained asleep, peaceful now, no longer alert or guarded. He stepped quietly into the kitchen and began to prepare a simple breakfast. The familiar routine grounded him. As he worked, he realized something had changed. The house no longer felt like just a place to survive. For the first time in years, it felt like a place that could hold more than one story. When the girl finally woke, she sat up quickly, disoriented for a moment. Then she remembered where she was. "Morning," he said gently. She relaxed when she saw him. "Morning." "I made some food," he said, "before you go." Her eyes softened. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to." She joined him at the table, eating quietly but gratefully. The food was simple, but it tasted better than anything she had eaten in a long time. When she finished, she stood and picked up her bag. "I should leave," she said. He nodded, though something in his chest resisted the idea. "The road east is rough," he said. "Be careful." She hesitated, then met his eyes. "Thank you," she said, "for the night, for the trust." He watched as she walked toward the door. Just before she reached it, he spoke again, his voice steady but thoughtful. "If you ever need a place again," he said, "this door isn't locked to you." She turned, surprised. A small smile appeared on her face, real this time. "I won't forget that," she said. She stepped outside into the early morning light, the wide land stretching before her. The rancher stood in the doorway, watching until she disappeared down the path. When he closed the door, the house was quiet again, but it was no longer empty in the same way. The day moved forward slowly after she left. The rancher returned to his usual work, but everything felt slightly off, as if a small stone had been placed inside his boot. Nothing painful, just enough to remind him with every step. He fed the animals, checked the fences, and repaired a loose board near the barn. His hands worked as they always had, steady and skilled, yet his mind wandered back to the quiet girl and the way she had stood in his doorway that morning. The land stretched wide and open under the growing sun. Normally, the open space gave him comfort. It reminded him why he chose this life. But today, the silence felt louder. He caught himself looking down the road more than once, half expecting to see her walking back. Each time, he shook his head at his own thoughts and went back to work. By afternoon, the wind picked up, carrying dust across the fields. Clouds gathered in the distance, heavy and slow. The rancher finished early and returned to the house. He washed up, made a simple meal and sat at the table alone. The chair across from him felt strangely noticeable, as if it remembered being used. As evening approached, the sky darkened more quickly than expected. The clouds grew thick, blocking the fading light. A low sound of thunder rolled across the land, far away but clear. Storms were common here, but something about this one felt stronger. The rancher stood by the window, watching the first drops of rain hit the dry ground. He thought of the girl again. He wondered where she was now, if she had found shelter, if she was safe. He told himself it wasn't his place to worry. She had survived on her own before. Still, the thought stayed with him. Then came another knock. This time he didn't hesitate. He opened the door to find her standing there again, hair damp from the rain, eyes wide but calm. She looked relieved, though she tried not to show it. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "The storm came fast. I remembered what you said." He stepped aside at once. "You did right," he said. "Come in." The door closed behind her, shutting out the wind and rain. The house felt full again, warmer somehow. She set her bag down and wiped her hands on her clothes, embarrassed by the water she brought in. "I didn't mean to come back so soon," she said. "I just didn't know where else to go." "You don't have to explain," he replied. "You're welcome." They stood there for a moment, the sound of rain filling the quiet. Then he smiled slightly. "Looks like you're staying another night," she nodded, grateful. "If that's okay." "It is." This time things felt different, less awkward. He put more wood on the fire and she helped without being asked. She moved carefully but confidently, as if trying not to take up too much space. He noticed how she paid attention to everything, where things were placed, how he did things. She was learning even without trying. They ate together again, the storm pounding steadily against the roof. Between bites, they spoke more than before. Not deep questions, just small pieces of life. She talked about places she had seen, roads she had walked, people who were kind and those who were not. He listened closely, never interrupting. After dinner, the power of the storm grew. Thunder cracked loudly overhead, making the house shake slightly. She flinched without meaning to, then quickly looked away as if ashamed. "It's all right," he said gently. "Storms pass." She nodded. "I know. Sometimes they just remind you of other things." He understood that more than he let on. Later, as the rain softened, they sat near the fire. The chair and the bed were still there, but neither of them mentioned sleeping yet. The night felt like it had something more to offer before rest. "You don't have to leave tomorrow if you don't want to," he said suddenly. She looked at him, surprised. "I don't want to be a burden." "You're not," he said firmly. "I could use some help around here. And you could use a place to breathe." She thought carefully before answering. "For how long?" "As long as it makes sense," he said. "No promises, no pressure." The honesty of his words made her trust him more. "I'd like that," she said quietly, "just for a little while." The fire burned lower as the night went on. They spoke less, but the silence felt comfortable now. Shared. When it came time to sleep, they didn't argue. She took the bed again and he took the chair, though he added more padding this time. Before turning away, she spoke softly. "You didn't have to do this." He looked at her. "Neither did you, but sometimes people meet when they need to." She smiled faintly and lay down. This time she slept more easily. Over the next few days, her presence became part of the ranch's rhythm. She woke early, helped with simple tasks, learned quickly. She respected the land and the animals, moving with care. The rancher found himself explaining things he had never explained before, hearing his own voice more than usual. They didn't rush anything. Trust grew slowly, like the land itself, shaped by time and patience. She shared more of her story in small pieces, and he shared his too. Not everything, but enough. One evening, as the sun set in soft colors, they stood side by side watching the horizon. "I think this place is helping me," she said. He nodded. "It's done that for me too." The ranch, once a place of quiet escape, had become something else entirely. A place where two lives, once moving alone, had crossed paths and found a reason to slow down. And neither of them knew yet how much that crossing would change everything that came next. Days turned into weeks without either of them noticing exactly when it happened. Life on the ranch found a new rhythm, one that included two people instead of one. The mornings began early, with the soft light of sunrise spreading across the land. The girl woke before the rancher most days, careful not to make noise. At first, she did small things, sweeping the floor, filling the water pot, preparing simple food. She never assumed anything belonged to her. She asked before using tools, before changing routines, before stepping into spaces that felt personal. The rancher noticed everything, even when he pretended not to. He saw how she worked with focus and respect, how she treated the animals gently, how she listened more than she spoke. She learned quickly, not just how to do the work, but how to understand the land. She could sense when the weather was about to change, when the animals were uneasy, when silence meant peace and when it meant trouble. At first, he kept emotional distance. He had learned long ago that attachment could bring pain, but the distance became harder to maintain. Conversations began to last longer. Silence no longer felt like a wall, but like a shared space where neither felt the need to fill it. One afternoon, while repairing a fence together, she paused and wiped sweat from her forehead. "You could have sent me away," she said suddenly. He looked up from his work. "I could have." "Why didn't you?" He considered the question carefully. "Because you asked honestly, and because I remembered what it feels like to have nowhere to go." She nodded slowly. "Not everyone remembers." That simple sentence stayed with him long after the fence was fixed. There were moments when the past tried to return. Some nights, she woke suddenly from sleep, breathing fast, her eyes wide. She never cried out, never made noise. The rancher noticed anyway. He never questioned her in those moments. He would quietly light the fire or place a cup of warm water nearby. Slowly, she learned that safety did not need to be proven every day. In return, she noticed his quiet struggles. The way he paused sometimes when speaking, as if choosing words carefully. The way certain memories tightened his jaw. One evening, as they sat outside watching the stars, she spoke gently. "You didn't always live alone, did you?" He didn't answer right away. The stars above were clear and endless. "No," he said finally. "I didn't." She waited, giving him space. "I lost people," he continued. "Not all at once, little by little, and one day I realized I'd built my life around being alone." "Did it help?" she asked. "It kept me standing," he said, "but it didn't heal anything." Her words came softly. "Maybe healing doesn't happen alone." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and realized how much wisdom lived behind her quiet nature. As time passed, the ranch felt less like a shelter and more like a home. Meals were shared. Laughter appeared in small moments, when a task went wrong, when the wind surprised them, when an animal behaved unexpectedly. None of it was forced. It simply happened. One evening, a visitor arrived from a nearby town, someone the rancher hadn't seen in years. The man looked surprised to see the girl there. Questions followed, curious but harmless. The rancher answered calmly, standing beside her without thinking. Later, when the visitor left, she spoke quietly. "You didn't explain me," she said. "I didn't feel the need to," he replied. Something settled inside her at that moment. For the first time in a long while, she felt chosen without conditions. Still, she never assumed the future. One morning, she stood outside longer than usual, staring down the road. The rancher noticed. "You thinking about leaving?" he asked, not accusing, just asking. She nodded. "I don't want to stay where I'm only tolerated." He walked beside her. "You're not tolerated here." She met his eyes. "Then why does it feel like I'm waiting for permission?" The question struck him deeply. He had offered space, safety, time, but had he offered belonging? "You don't need permission," he said quietly. "You're already part of this place." She exhaled, as if releasing a breath she'd been holding for weeks. That night the wind moved softly through the grass. They sat by the fire, closer than before, though not touching. Words felt unnecessary. "I don't know what comes next," she said. "Neither do I," he replied. "But I know what's here now." She smiled, small but real. "That's enough for tonight." As the fire burned low, the rancher realized something had changed in him. He no longer feared the sound of footsteps in his house. He no longer avoided the thought of tomorrow. The loneliness he once accepted as permanent had loosened its grip. Outside, the land remained wide and open, unchanged. But inside the small house, something rare had taken root. Not dependence, not obligation, but trust built slowly, honestly. And while neither of them named it, both understood that this was no longer just a temporary stop along the road. It was a turning point, quiet and unannounced, but powerful enough to reshape the lives they thought were already decided. The change did not come suddenly. It arrived in small moments, quiet ones that could easily be missed if someone was not paying attention. The rancher noticed it first one early morning when he woke before sunrise and heard soft footsteps in the kitchen. The girl was already awake, preparing breakfast, humming quietly to herself. It was a sound that belonged to comfort, not fear. He stood in the doorway for a moment, listening, and realized that the house no longer felt like a place he returned to at the end of the day. It felt like a place he lived in. They worked side by side that day without much talking. Words were no longer needed for every task. A glance was enough. A small gesture explained what needed to be done. Trust had settled between them like the dust on the fields, slow, natural, and impossible to rush. Later that afternoon, a letter arrived from town. The rancher read it carefully, then folded it and placed it on the table. He did not speak right away. The girl noticed the change in his posture, the way his shoulders stiffened slightly. "Is something wrong?" she asked. "No," he said honestly, "just news." She waited. "They're offering to buy part of the land," he continued. "Good money, enough to make things easier." "And will you?" she asked. He looked out the window at the fields, the fences they had repaired together, the land that had held his silence for so many years. "I don't think so," he said. "Some things aren't meant to be divided." She smiled, not because of the decision itself, but because he had shared it with her. It meant he saw her as part of his life, not just someone passing through. As weeks turned into months, the seasons began to shift. The air grew cooler, the nights longer. The girl grew more confident, her steps firmer, her laughter easier. She no longer flinched at sudden sounds. She slept through the night most days. The rancher noticed how she spoke more about the future, even if she did not fully realize it. One evening they sat outside watching the sky change colors. The land was quiet, peaceful. "I used to think staying meant giving up," she said suddenly. "Giving up what?" he asked. "Freedom," she replied. "I thought if I stayed anywhere too long, I'd lose myself." "And now?" he asked. "And now I think maybe staying is how you find yourself again." Her words stayed with him long after the sun disappeared. There came a day when she stood by the door, holding her bag. The rancher felt a familiar tightness in his chest, but he said nothing. He had learned not to hold people back. "I need to go to town," she said. "There are things I should take care of, papers, work, questions I've avoided." He nodded. "You should." "I'll be back," she added quickly, then paused. "If that's all right." He smiled gently. "This isn't a one-night stay anymore," he said. "You don't need permission to return." She left that morning, walking down the same road she once arrived on, but her steps were different now. Stronger, steadier. The ranch felt quiet again, but not empty. The rancher returned to his routines, but now they carried meaning beyond habit. He fixed things she would notice. He cooked meals she liked, even when she wasn't there. He realized that care had quietly woven itself into his life. When she returned days later, the reunion was simple. No rush, no dramatic words, just a shared look and a calm understanding that something important had remained unchanged. That night, they sat by the fire, closer than before, not touching but not distant either. "I don't know what to call this," she said softly. He thought for a moment. "We don't have to name it." She nodded, relieved. "Good." The future did not unfold in grand promises. There were no sudden plans, no spoken vows. Instead, there were shared mornings, steady work, quiet evenings, and mutual respect. The ranch became a place of growth, not escape. The girl no longer felt like someone who had been allowed to stay. She felt rooted. The rancher no longer felt like a man hiding from the world. He felt present. One evening, as they closed the barn together, she looked at him and said, "Thank you, not just for the roof, for seeing me." He met her gaze. "Thank you for knocking." They stood there for a moment, the land stretching endlessly around them, the sky wide above. Two lives that once moved alone had found balance without force, connection without demand. The story did not end there. Life continued as it always does, with challenges and quiet joys. But one truth remained steady. What began as a simple request for one night had become a shared life built on kindness, patience, and choice. And sometimes, that is the most real ending of all.